Yo, what's up, gamers? Tonight we're diving into the absolutely tragic, completely unhinged, mental boom-inducing relationship between Piltover and Zaun. I'm not talking about the kind of rivalry where you just hate the enemy team. I'm talking about the kind of systematic oppression and class warfare that makes your worst ranked experience look like a casual ARAM. This is two cities, literally stacked on top of each other, where one lives in golden luxury and the other suffocates in toxic smog, and somehow they both pretend this is fine. So real quick, hit that like button if you're here for the vibes, subscribe if you're not a coward, and leave a comment telling me your main, and whether you're hard stuck or actually climbing. No flame, we're all in this together. Now dim the lights, put your phone on silent, get comfy, and maybe grab some water because we're about to go deep into some truly cursed lore. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how two cities ended up with such a toxic relationship? Like, what kind of disaster has to happen to create a literal class system where your zip code determines if you live to 80 or die at 35? Could you survive even one day in Zaun without your lungs giving up? And how does a society go from we're building a canal together to half of us live in a golden utopia while the other half eats toxic waste for breakfast? Is it worse than demoting from your series 5 times in a row? What would it actually feel like to live in a city where the people above you dump their garbage directly onto your head and call it progress? Alright, congratulations. You've just spawned into pre-Arcane Piltover and Zaun. The year is sometime before Jace and Victor make Hextech go mainstream, before Vi and Jinx become the poster children for sibling trauma, and before everything goes completely off the rails. You have no sums, no vision, and your mental is already doomed. Welcome to the Twin Cities. Good luck. You're gonna need it. Alright, so let's talk about how Piltover and Zaun used to be one city. Yeah, you heard that right. Before the divorce that makes your parents split look amicable, these two were actually the same place. Picture this. You're living in a time when humanity looked at the ocean separating two continents and said, you know what? Let's build a massive canal right here because we're built different. And for a while, it actually worked. People were vibing, trade was booming, and everything was going great. It's like that one game where your team is actually coordinating and you're thinking, wow, maybe we can win this. The city was just called Zaun back then, which honestly sounds way cooler than what we have now. It sat right on this narrow isthmus connecting two major land masses, and some absolute mad lads decided to dig a canal straight through it. We're talking about a construction project so ambitious it makes Wonder of the World look like a Bronze 4 tryhard project. Ships could sail through instead of going around an entire continent, cutting travel time by months. The city became the trading hub of Valoran. Money flowed in from everywhere. Demacia, Noxus, Shurima, Ionia. Everyone wanted a piece of this action. You've got merchants setting up shop, inventors creating wild machinery, families moving in from all over Runeterra because this is where opportunity lives. The Canal District is thriving, the upper districts are beautiful, and people are genuinely optimistic about the future. It's that brief moment in Champion Select where everyone's being nice and calling their roles politely and you think, maybe this won't be toxic. But here's the thing about ambitious construction projects built on questionable foundations. They don't always hold up. The engineers and architects were so focused on making this canal happen that they possibly didn't do enough geological surveys. They didn't account for the underground rivers, the unstable rock formations, or the fact that digging a massive trench through an isthmus might have consequences. It's like building your entire team comp around one win condition and not having a backup plan for when that gets shut down. The city kept expanding, building upward and downward, adding more districts and more infrastructure. They dug deeper to make the canal wider, to accommodate bigger ships, to maximize profits. And underneath it all, the foundation was slowly giving out. There were small tremors, minor collapses, warning signs that something was wrong. But you know how it is. Everyone just said it was fine, kept building, kept expanding, kept ignoring the cracks in the walls. It's like when your client is crashing but you keep playing anyway because you're in promos and you can't dodge. No one wanted to admit that their perfect city might have a fatal flaw, because admitting it would mean stopping construction, losing money, and accepting that maybe they pushed progress too far too fast. So they didn't. They kept building. And that, my friends, is how you set up one of the worst disasters in Runeterra's history. Anyway, remember this feeling of optimism and unity, because it's about to get absolutely griefed in the next section. Now here's where it gets absolutely griefing. Imagine you're just living your life in this prosperous canal city, maybe working on some fancy prototype or selling fish at the market, and then one day, the entire foundation of your city just gives up. Like, the ground beneath you says, "I'm done," and opens up like a fed Cho'Gath's mouth. We're talking about a collapse so catastrophic that it makes your LP drops look cute. The entire district, homes, businesses, families, dreams, your grandma's secret cookie recipe, all of it just falls into this massive chasm. The official records call it the disaster or the Great Collapse, but honestly those names don't do it justice. This wasn't like a building falling down or a bridge collapsing. This was entire city blocks just dropping into the earth, taking thousands of people with them. You're standing in your house one moment, and the next moment you're in free fall, watching your entire neighborhood crumble around you, screaming as the ground rushes up to meet you. Except it's not ground anymore. It's just darkness and rubble and the sound of stone grinding against stone. The collapse happened in the lower districts first, the areas closest to the canal where they dug the deepest. The supporting structures gave out, and it created this cascading failure that rippled through multiple levels of the city. If you were on the upper levels, you felt the tremors, watched in horror as entire sections of the city just vanished, heard the screams echoing up from below. If you were in the lower levels, you didn't get a choice. You fell. And here's the part that makes it even worse. It wasn't instant. The collapse happened over several hours, maybe even days in some sections. You'd think you were safe, that your district was fine, and then another tremor would hit and more ground would give way. People were trying to evacuate, but where do you go when the ground itself is betraying you? It's like trying to escape a Karthus ult, except the ult lasts for hours and keeps getting bigger. The wealthy families, the merchants, the politicians, they were mostly in the upper districts, the fancy neighborhoods built on more stable ground. They survived. Their beautiful houses with their imported marble and their expensive tapestries stayed standing. Meanwhile, the workers, the laborers, the people who actually built the canal with their own hands, they were living in the cheaper housing closer to the construction zones. They were the ones who fell. Thousands died in the initial collapse. Thousands more were trapped in the rubble, suffocating in the darkness, waiting for rescue that came too slowly or didn't come at all. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones survived and had to dig themselves out through hundreds of feet of collapsed stone and twisted metal, drinking toxic water, eating whatever they could find, listening to the screams of people they couldn't reach. And the crazy part? The people up top, the rich folks who were safe, they looked down at the smoking crater where thousands of people just disappeared and basically said, well, that's unfortunate, and then started planning how to rebuild. Not how to save people, not how to help the survivors, how to rebuild their profitable trade city. It's like your jungler watching you die to a gank, and then just taking your farm instead of trying to save you. So yeah, that's how one city became two. The people who survived above decided they were Piltover now. The people who fell into the darkness became Zaun, and that's what we call a certified League of Legends moment. Okay, so this next part? Absolutely unhinged. After the collapse, the people who survived on the upper levels decided to rebrand. They looked at the disaster they partially caused and said, let's just pretend we're the pinnacle of human achievement and call it Piltover, the City of Progress. And honestly, the marketing worked. Piltover became this gleaming golden city where innovation thrives, Hextech is born, and everyone walks around in fancy coats pretending they didn't just build their utopia on top of thousands of corpses. The architecture is beautiful, not gonna lie. You've got these gorgeous Art Deco buildings with brass fixtures and stained glass windows, wide boulevards with actual trees and gardens, bridges that span between towers like something out of a fantasy painting. Everything is clean, organized, and designed to look impressive. It's the kind of city where you walk around and think, wow, humanity really made it. Until you remember that it's literally built on top of a mass grave and maintained through systematic exploitation. Piltover calls itself the City of Progress, and they're not entirely wrong. This is where some of the most advanced technology in Runeterra gets invented. Hextech, mechanized transportation, advanced medicine, precision engineering. If it's cutting edge and expensive, it probably came from Piltover. The city attracts inventors, scientists, and artists from all over the world because this is where you go if you want your innovations to actually matter. It's like the challenger tier of cities. Everyone wants to get here, and once you're here, you don't want to leave. The Piltovan government is run by a council of noble families and wealthy merchants, the ones who had enough money to survive the collapse and buy their way into power afterward. They make all the decisions, control all the trade, and generally act like benevolent dictators who know what's best for everyone. They'll tell you it's a meritocracy, that anyone with talent can succeed in Piltover, but that's only true if you ignore the massive systemic barriers they've put in place to keep the wrong people out. Because here's the thing about Piltover's progress, it's only for Piltovans. If you're born into one of the founding families, you get the best education, the best opportunities, and the best connections. You start life with every advantage. If you're born in Zaun, good luck even getting through the checkpoints to enter Piltover, let alone trying to patent an invention or start a business. The system is designed to keep Piltover on top and everyone else scrambling. And they justify it all with this rhetoric about civilization and progress and the greater good. They'll tell you that Piltover represents the best of humanity, that they're lighting the way forward for all of Runeterra, that their innovations benefit everyone. Meanwhile, they're dumping toxic waste into Zaun, employing Zaunite workers for poverty wages, and actively suppressing any competition from below. It's like that fed enemy laner who keeps saying better player wins in all chat, while their jungler has been camping your lane for 15 minutes. The average Piltovan citizen, they genuinely believe they live in a perfect society. They walk through their clean streets, work in their safe laboratories, eat in their fancy restaurants, and never have to think about where their prosperity comes from. They don't see the Zaunites working in their factories. They don't smell the toxic air below. They don't hear the coughing of children dying from lung disease. They just see progress, innovation, and beauty. It's the most effective gaslighting operation in Runeterra's history. Piltover convinced the world and itself that it's a utopia, when really it's just really good at hiding its crimes behind pretty architecture and impressive technology. Anyway, that's why Piltover is like that. Riot really said, let's make a city that looks perfect but is actually dystopian, and then made everyone believe the marketing. Could be worse though. You could live in Zaun. Let me tell you about what happened to everyone who fell. So you're trapped in this dark, collapsed hellscape under what used to be your city, and you've got two options: die or adapt. And the people of Zaun, they chose to adapt in the most griefing, stubborn way possible. They built a city in the darkness, powered by the runoff and toxic waste from Piltover above. It's like playing League on 200 ping while your enemy has 10 ping. You're at a massive disadvantage, but you learn to predict everything 3 seconds early, or you don't survive. After the collapse, the survivors found themselves in this massive network of canyons, crevasses, and caverns created by the falling buildings. Some areas had collapsed completely into rubble. Others had buildings that somehow stayed partially intact, just tilted at weird angles or hanging from the rock walls by their foundations. And everyone trapped down there had a choice: dig up through hundreds of feet of unstable rubble, or dig down and try to make something work. They dug down. They cleared the rubble, shored up the surviving structures, and started building in the spaces between the fallen buildings. They carved into the rock walls, creating new platforms and districts. They salvaged materials from the collapse: steel beams, copper pipes, glass, anything they could use. And slowly, incredibly, they built a city in the depths. Not a pretty city, not a planned city, but a city that worked. Zaun became this vertical maze of platforms connected by bridges, cables, and rickety elevators. You've got districts stacked on top of other districts with narrow walkways threading between them. Buildings grow organically, additions bolted onto existing structures whenever someone needs more space. It's chaotic, cramped, and absolutely not up to any building code ever written. But it's home. The deeper you go in Zaun, the worse it gets. The upper levels, closest to Piltover, get some natural light filtering down through the cracks and vents. The air is still toxic but breathable if you're tough. These are the nice parts of Zaun, where successful merchants and augmentation specialists live. The middle levels are where most people exist, working in factories and workshops, living in cramped apartments, breathing air that'll take years off your life expectancy. And the lower levels, the sump? That's where things get really griefing. That's where the toxic runoff pools, where the air is thick enough to chew, where people are so desperate they'll try anything to survive. But here's the thing about Zaunites. They're survivors. They're innovators out of pure necessity. They look at problems that would make Piltovans give up, and they find solutions, usually involving things that are technically illegal or medically inadvisable. Can't breathe the air. Invent a better respirator. Can't compete with Piltovan workers. Augment your body to work faster and longer. Can't afford proper medicine. Cook up something in your bathtub that might cure you or might kill you, but at least it's an option. Zaun has no real government, no formal laws, just territories controlled by various chem barons and crime syndicates who maintain order through force. It's not ideal, but it's what they have. The culture is all about self-reliance, innovation, and loyalty to your own. If Piltover is about appearances and respectability, Zaun is about results and survival. Doesn't matter how you look, doesn't matter if your methods are pretty. Did it work? Then it's good enough. The funny thing is, Zaun produces some of the most brilliant minds in Runeterra. When you're forced to innovate or die, when you don't have access to fancy materials or proper funding, you get creative. You learn to make something from nothing. Zaunite engineering is chaotic and dangerous, but it's also practical and effective in ways that Piltovan tech often isn't. It's like the difference between a clean, optimized build and a jank off-meta strategy that somehow works better in practice. So yeah, next time you think about Zaun, remember, it's not a failed city. It's a city that refused to die. It's a city built by people who got abandoned and decided to survive out of pure spite. It's the hard-stuck gold player who's developed the most unhinged strategy you've ever seen and climbed to diamond anyway. That's Zaun. They're not victims, they're just pissed off. Alright, so here's where Zaun gets creative in the worst way possible. When you're living in a toxic pit with no sunlight and Piltover is dumping all their chemical waste on your head, you can either complain about it, or you can weaponize it. Zaun chose option 2. They looked at the rivers of toxic sludge flowing through their streets and said, what if we huffed this? And thus Chemtech was born. This is the equivalent of your team being so far behind that you start building full lethality on an enchanter support because nothing else is working. Chemtech runs on chemicals so dangerous they'd be banned in any reasonable society. But in Zaun, it's your only advantage. The basis of Chemtech is taking toxic substances, industrial waste, alchemical compounds, things that would kill a normal person on contact, and refining them into something useful. Fuel sources, medicines, enhancement drugs, weapons. If it's volatile and dangerous and probably shouldn't exist, it's probably Chemtech. The most basic application is power generation. Zaun doesn't have access to the sun, doesn't have clean water to run hydroelectric systems, and definitely can't afford Piltover's expensive energy solutions, so they burn chemicals. They've got these massive refineries and processors that take toxic sludge and convert it into fuel that can power their factories, light their streets, and run their machinery. Is it clean? Absolutely not. Does it produce fumes that'll melt your lungs? Yes. But it works, and that's what matters. Then you've got Chemtech augmentation, which we'll talk about more later, but basically it's using chemicals to enhance your body beyond normal human limits. Strength enhancers, reflex boosters, pain suppressors, stuff that lets you work longer and harder and faster. It's performance-enhancing drugs taken to the absolute extreme. Athletes in our world take steroids and get banned. Zaunites take Chemtech and become superhuman. Or they die. Usually it's somewhere in between. Chemtech weapons are where things get really unhinged. You've got toxic gas grenades, acidic projectiles, chemically powered explosives, all sorts of things that violate every convention of warfare ever written. Piltover has guns and Hextech weapons that are precise and clean. Zaun has chem throwers that melt your face off and leave you screaming. It's not elegant, but it's effective. When you're fighting against people with better equipment and training, you need every advantage you can get, even if that advantage is literal war crimes. And then there's Shimmer, which deserves its own segment, but we'll touch on it here. Shimmer is the endgame of chemtech, a substance so powerful and so addictive that it changes everything about Zaun's power structure. It's like if someone invented a consumable in League that gave you plus 150% damage and attack speed, but also had a 30% chance to kill you. You'd still use it, because sometimes you need that power spike, or you lose anyway. The problem with chemtech is that it's inherently unstable and dangerous. The scientists and chemists developing this stuff don't have proper safety equipment, don't have formal training, and definitely don't have ethics committees telling them no. They're experimenting in basement labs with substances that could level a city block if mixed wrong. Accidents happen constantly. Explosions, toxic releases, mutations, just part of doing business in Zaun. But the alternative is staying weak, staying poor, staying at the mercy of Piltover. Chemtech is Zaun's answer to Hextech. It's not as clean, not as stable, not as marketable to the rest of Runeterra, but it's theirs. It's innovation born from desperation, powered by spite, and maintained through sheer stubbornness. Piltover has progress, Zaun has survival, and sometimes survival requires doing things that would make angels weep and safety inspectors have heart attacks. It's innovation born from desperation, and honestly, it's kind of genius in a completely unhinged way. Anyway, that's why every Zaunite champion in League has some kind of toxic ability or mutation. Riot really said, let's make their entire culture about huffing chemicals, and honestly, it tracks. Now let's talk about the absolutely tilting social structure here. In Piltover, if you're born into one of the founding families, the Karamans, the Pharaohs, the Medardas, you're basically starting the game with a full build, while everyone else is still farming for their first item. These people control everything. The government, the trade, the hextech patents, even what counts as acceptable innovation. Meanwhile, in Zaun, you're born with nothing, and the game expects you to somehow scale. Let's start with Piltover's elite. The founding families are the ones whose ancestors survived the collapse and had enough wealth to buy their way into the new power structure. They own the trading companies, the manufacturing facilities, the shipping lanes. They sit on the council and make all the laws. They decide which inventions get funding and which get ignored. They're the gatekeepers of opportunity, and they like it that way. If you're born into one of these families, your life is set. You get private tutors, advanced education, connections to every important person in the city. You can fail upward because your family name opens doors that talent alone never could. Want to start a business? Your family provides the capital. Want to enter politics? Your family has council connections. Want to invent something? Your family can afford the laboratory space and materials. It's like playing League with a coach, a full pre-made team, and voice comms while everyone else is solo queue. Then you've got the merchant class, people who aren't quite noble but have enough wealth to matter. Successful inventors, traders, shop owners, people who've made something of themselves through business. They're comfortable, respected, and live good lives in Piltover. They can't quite reach the heights of the founding families, but they're doing well enough that they don't question the system. It's like being in Platinum. You're good, but you know there's a ceiling above you that's really hard to break through. Below that, you've got normal Piltovan citizens, workers, clerks, craftsmen, people doing honest labor. They're still better off than anyone in Zaun. They have safe housing, clean air, access to medicine. But they're wage slaves in a system that doesn't care about them. They work for the founding families and the merchants, making just enough to survive but never enough to advance. It's the gold elo trap where you can see the promised land above you but can't quite climb there. And then there's Zaun. In Zaun, your class is determined by how deep you live. The upper levels closest to Piltover are where the successful people are. Chem barons, wealthy merchants, talented augmentation specialists, people who've carved out power and influence through force or skill. They're not comfortable by Piltover standards, but they have resources, they have security, they have options. It's like being a hard-stuck master tier player. You're good, but you're still fundamentally in the grind. Most Zaunites exist in the middle levels: factory workers, miners, mechanics, shopkeepers, enforcers for the Chem Barons. They work brutal hours in dangerous conditions, breathing toxic air, living in cramped housing, making barely enough to feed their families. Your parents probably did the same work, and your children will probably do it too. Social mobility is possible, but rare. You need talent, luck, and the willingness to do things that might get you killed. It's like being hard-stuck silver. You're in the majority, and getting out requires extraordinary effort. And then there's the sump, the absolute bottom of Zaun, where the most desperate people survive. No steady work, no safety, just day-to-day survival in conditions that would kill outsiders in hours. The air is so toxic you need serious augmentation or a really good respirator. The water is poison. The only opportunities are crime, drug manufacturing, or selling your body for medical experiments. This is Bronze 4 0LP, except there's no reset and you can't make a Smurf account. Your life expectancy in Piltover is 70-80 years. In Zaun's upper levels, maybe 50-60. In the middle levels, 40-50. In the sump, you're lucky to hit 30. And this isn't a secret. Everyone knows. Piltover knows that their prosperity is built on Zaunite suffering. Zaun knows that they're being systematically oppressed, but the system is designed to maintain itself. Piltover has all the military power, all the economic power, all the political power. Zaun has rage and desperation, which isn't nothing, but it's not enough to change the system. The worst part, there's just enough mobility to maintain the illusion. Occasionally, a Zaunite invents something brilliant and gets sponsored by a Piltovan patron. Occasionally, someone fights their way into the merchant class. It happens rarely enough that it seems special, but often enough that people can tell themselves anyone can make it if they just work hard enough. It's the same lie every oppressive system tells. Your poverty is your fault, not a systemic issue. It's like Riot designed a ranked system where some players start in Diamond and others start in Iron, except you can't climb and there's no reset, and everyone just accepts it because that's how it's always been. Okay, so in the power vacuum of Zaun's Undercity, some absolute mad lads decided to become crime lords. The Chem Barons are basically what happens when you give a bunch of Fed assassins control of entire districts and tell them there are no rules. Each Chem Baron controls their own territory, runs their own chemtech operations, and has their own private army of augmented enforcers. It's like if every region in Zaun was controlled by a different one-trick who's so good at their champion that you can't even enter their territory without getting absolutely demolished. The Chem Barons rose to power after the collapse, when Zaun had no formal government and no one to maintain order. Strong, ruthless individuals saw opportunities and took them by force. They claimed territories, established control through violence, and built criminal empires that became the de facto government of the Undercity. Piltover doesn't officially recognize them, but everyone in Zaun knows who really runs things. Each Chem Baron has their own specialty, their own approach to power. Some control the drug trade, manufacturing and distributing enhancement chemicals and recreational substances. Others run protection rackets, offering safety to businesses in exchange for regular payments. Some manage the factories, employing thousands of workers and providing the one thing Piltover can't ignore: cheap labor and manufacturing capacity. And some are just straight-up warlords who maintain power through fear and violence. Let's talk about some of the major players. Silco is probably the most infamous, the one who'd later become the main antagonist in ARCANE. But before he had Shimmer and before his rise to dominance, he was just one Chem Baron among several. He controlled territories in the mid-levels, ran chemtech operations, and had ambitions way bigger than his current power. He's the player who's stuck in Diamond, but absolutely knows he should be Challenger, and is grinding nonstop to prove it. Then you've got Cross, one of the more established Chem Barons, who runs massive industrial operations. He's got legitimate businesses that even Piltover trades with, but he also controls huge portions of Zaun's manufacturing sector. He's playing the long game, building actual economic power instead of just violence. He's the player who's mastered macro strategy and doesn't need to stomp lane to win games. Rennie controls territories near the Sump, the absolute worst parts of Zaun, which means she's probably the toughest of the bunch. Anyone who can maintain power in the Sump is someone you don't mess with. She's got augmented enforcers who are more machine than human, and her operations are brutal, even by Zaun standards. She's that player who's so mechanically skilled, they can win unfavorable matchups through pure aggression. Finn is one of the younger, more ambitious Chem Barons, always looking for opportunities to expand his territory and influence. He's a schemer, making deals and playing politics while also being willing to throw down when necessary. He's the player who's good at the game, but also knows how to manipulate people, working every angle to climb. The Chem Barons maintain an uneasy truce with each other because full-scale war would be bad for everyone's business. They have territories that sometimes overlap, deals that cross Baron lines, and shared interests in keeping Piltover from cracking down too hard on the Undercity. But they're also constantly testing each other, looking for weaknesses, ready to expand if someone shows vulnerability. It's like a five-way Mexican standoff where everyone's pointing guns at everyone else, but no one wants to be the first to shoot. Their enforcers are the muscle that keeps everything running. These aren't police officers or soldiers. They're thugs, augmented fighters, and loyal employees who maintain order through intimidation and violence. If you don't pay your protection money, enforcers show up. If you try to operate in someone else's territory without permission, enforcers show up. If you disrespect a Chem Baron, enforcers show up and you disappear. It's not justice, it's just power dynamics. The crazy thing is, the Chem Barons actually provide services that Zaun needs. They maintain some level of order, they provide employment, they fund innovation that Piltover won't touch, and they protect Zaun from external threats. Yes, they're crime lords. Yes, they're exploitative and violent, but in the absence of any legitimate government, they're what Zaun has. They're not heroes, but they're not entirely villains either. They're just the natural result of a society that was abandoned and left to govern itself. Silco, Rennie, Cross, Finn, these aren't just crime bosses. They're warlords in a city where the only law is don't die. And the worst part? They're not even the biggest problem Zaun faces. They're just symptoms of a city that was abandoned and left to govern itself through violence and chemtech. Anyway, that's why Zaun politics are more complicated than your average ranked game. At least in League you know who the enemy is. In Zaun, everyone's the enemy, but also maybe your ally, but also probably about to stab you in the back. Let me tell you about Piltover's approach to law enforcement, which is basically protect the rich and ignore everyone else. The enforcers are supposed to keep the peace, but in reality they're just there to make sure the wealthy families don't get bothered by anything unpleasant, including the knowledge that Zaun exists. They patrol the nice districts, they protect shipments of valuable goods, and occasionally they venture into Zaun to establish order, which really means beat up some poor people, and then leave. The enforcers are Piltover's official police force, well-equipped and well-trained by the standards of Valorant. They've got proper uniforms, standardized weapons, military discipline, and legal authority backed by the council. In theory, they exist to serve and protect all citizens of Piltover. In practice, they're the enforcement arm of the founding family's interests. It's like having a support who only wards their own jungle and never roams bot lane even when you're getting dove. In Piltover proper, the enforcers actually do their jobs. They patrol the streets, respond to crimes, investigate theft and violence, maintain public order. If you're a Piltovan citizen and someone robs you, the enforcers will investigate and probably catch the thief. If there's a fight in the street, enforcers break it up. If there's a fire, they coordinate the response. For Pilties, the enforcers work exactly as advertised, professional, efficient, and helpful. But venture down into the Entresol or Zaun, and it's a different story. Down there, enforcers operate more like an occupying military force than police officers. They conduct raids looking for contraband, mostly chemtech weapons and drugs that Piltover has declared illegal. They set up checkpoints to control movement between the cities. They break up gatherings that look too organized because organized Zaunites are dangerous to the status quo, and they do it all with overwhelming force and minimal accountability. Here's the thing about enforcer operations in Zaun. They're not about justice or safety. They're about maintaining Piltover's control and making sure Zaun doesn't get too powerful or too organized. A Zaunite invents a revolutionary new technology. Enforcers confiscate it as dangerous contraband, and maybe a Piltovan company will patent a similar version later. A community group starts organizing for better conditions. Enforcers shut it down as a criminal conspiracy. Someone from Zaun tries to start a legitimate business in Piltover. Enforcers find a reason to arrest them or deny their permits. The enforcers also serve as the border control between the cities. They guard the main bridge and the few other official access points, checking papers, searching for contraband, and generally making it clear that Zaunites aren't welcome topside unless they have a very good reason. Want to visit Piltover's markets? Better have permits. Want to attend the academy? Better have money and sponsorship. Want to patent an invention? Better hope an enforcer doesn't decide your papers aren't in order. When actual crime happens in Piltover, sophisticated theft, smuggling operations, organized crime, the enforcers are often completely outmatched. They're trained for street-level peacekeeping, not detective work or dealing with criminals who are smarter than them. That's why Piltover has such a thriving private investigation industry, because the enforcers can't or won't solve complex crimes. Wealthy families hire private investigators when something important goes missing, because trusting the enforcers to figure it out is like trusting your bronze teammates to execute a perfect dive comp. The enforcers also have a corruption problem that everyone knows about but no one officially acknowledges. Individual officers take bribes to look the other way, accepting payments from smugglers, criminals, and chem barons to leave certain operations alone. Some enforcers run protection rackets on the side. Others steal from the evidence rooms. The institution is supposed to be noble and just, but the reality is, it's full of people who are underpaid compared to Piltover's elite and have plenty of opportunities to supplement their income through illegal means. And when enforcers do venture into Zaun for major operations, it usually goes badly. They're walking into hostile territory where everyone knows the terrain better than them, where the locals have no reason to cooperate, and where the criminals have augmented enforcers who can match or exceed Piltover's troops in combat effectiveness. Enforcer raids into Zaun often end with casualties on both sides and not much accomplished except increased resentment. The leadership of the enforcers knows all this. The council knows all this. But fixing it would require admitting that Piltover's justice system is fundamentally broken and biased toward the wealthy. It would require investing resources into Zaun, treating Zaunites as citizens worthy of protection rather than threats to be controlled. It would require systemic change. So instead, they maintain the status quo, tell themselves the enforcers are doing a fine job, and ignore the problems until they become too big to ignore. It's basically that teammate who's always alive but never at any team fights. Like, yeah, you're doing something, but are you actually helping? The answer is no, but they'll never admit it. Now here's where it gets really griefing. While Zaun is innovating with toxic chemicals and body augmentation, Piltover discovers hex tech, literal magic crystals that can power anything from transportation to weapons to your morning coffee maker. It's clean, it's efficient, and most importantly, it's controlled entirely by Piltover's elite. Jace and Victor invent this world-changing technology, and instead of sharing it with everyone, including the people suffering below, Piltover patents it, monopolizes it, and uses it to become even more powerful. Hextech is the fusion of magic and technology, powered by hex crystals that contain concentrated magical energy. These crystals are incredibly rare and mostly come from Shurima or other distant regions where magic is strong. Before Hextech, the crystals were valuable, but not particularly useful. They glowed, they had magical properties, but no one knew how to actually harness that energy in a controlled way. Then, Jace, Talus, and Victor, two brilliant inventors working in Piltover, figured out how to stabilize and channel the crystal's energy into mechanical devices. The first Hextech devices were simple. Tools that could perform tasks with magical efficiency, lights that never needed fuel, small gadgets that impressed the Academy. But the potential was immediately obvious. If you could power devices with Hextech, you could revolutionize everything. Transportation, manufacturing, construction, medicine, weapons, every industry could be transformed. It's like someone discovered how to turn mana into electricity, and everyone realized this changes everything. Piltover immediately recognized Hextech's value and moved to control it. The council granted exclusive patents to approved inventors, mostly people connected to the founding families. They regulated who could own hex crystals, who could build Hextech devices, who could sell Hextech products. They created a legal framework that ensured Hextech remained a Piltover monopoly, and they used their control over the technology to cement their position as the most advanced and powerful city in Valorant. Hextech transportation changed everything. Before Hextech, moving goods and people was slow and expensive. After Hextech, you had vehicles that could carry massive loads with minimal crew, ships that could navigate autonomously, cranes that could lift weights impossible for normal machinery. Piltover's port became even more dominant because they could process cargo faster than anyone else. The loading docks got Hextech cranes, the rail systems got Hextech engines, the entire infrastructure upgraded. Hextech weapons stayed mostly theoretical. The Council limited military applications because they didn't want Hextech falling into the wrong hands. But private citizens and enforcers started carrying Hextech pistols, precise weapons that were far more effective than normal firearms, and everyone knew that if Piltover ever needed to, they could weaponize. Hextech on a massive scale. It's the nuclear option that keeps everyone else from getting too aggressive. Meanwhile, Zaun gets none of it. Hex crystals are expensive and tightly controlled. You can't just buy one in Zaun without serious connections and massive amounts of money. The knowledge of how to build Hextech devices is kept secret, taught only at Piltover's Academy to approved students. And even if a Zaunite somehow got their hands on a Hex crystal and figured out Hextech, they'd have no legal way to sell or use their inventions because Piltover owns all the patents and would shut them down immediately. It's like if Riot released a new mythic item that was absolutely broken, but only players in Diamond and above could buy it. Zaun looks at Hextech the same way you look at the enemy ADC who's somehow 10-0 at 15 minutes. It's not fair, you didn't get the same opportunities, and now you're permanently behind through no fault of your own. Some Zaunites try to steal Hextech devices or smuggle Hex crystals from Piltover, but it's dangerous and difficult. Piltover guards their Hextech carefully, and getting caught with stolen Hextech is a serious crime that'll get you thrown in Stillwater Prison for years. A few talented Zaunite inventors have tried to reverse engineer Hextech or develop their own versions, but without access to proper materials and knowledge, it's incredibly hard. Victor himself came from Zaun originally, and even he needed Piltover resources and sponsorship to make Hextech work. The economic implications are massive. Piltover's monopoly on Hextech means they control the most valuable technology in Runeterra. Other nations have to buy from Piltover, trade with Piltover, play by Piltover's rules if they want access. It's made Piltover incredibly wealthy and politically powerful. And none of that wealth or power trickles down to Zaun, even though Zaunites manufacture many of the non-Hextech components that go into Hextech devices. Hextech represents everything wrong with Piltover's version of progress. It's incredible technology that could improve lives across Runeterra, but it's locked behind patents and monopolies that ensure only the wealthy benefit. It's innovation without ethics, progress without compassion, advancement that leaves the vulnerable behind. Piltover calls it the future. Zaun calls it another way they're getting screwed. So yeah, next time you wonder why Zaun hates Piltover so much, remember that Piltover literally has magic technology that could solve most of Zaun's problems, and they're just not sharing. They're hoarding it, profiting from it, and using it to maintain their dominance. It's the most Piltover thing ever. Alright, so let's talk about the Gray, which is possibly the most griefing environmental hazard in all of Runeterra. The Gray is this thick toxic fog that settles in Zaun's lower levels, and breathing it is like taking true damage directly to your lungs. It's created by all the industrial runoff from Piltover, mixed with Zaun's own chem factories, and it just sits there in the streets like a permanent singed poison trail that you can't escape from. The Gray wasn't always there. Right after the collapse, Zaun's air was bad but breathable. Dusty, smoky from fires, but you could manage without equipment. Then Piltover started industrializing above, and Zaun started industrializing below, and all that pollution had to go somewhere. In Piltover, it goes up and disperses into the atmosphere. In Zaun, it sinks down into the lower levels and just accumulates, getting thicker and more toxic every year. It's a thick greenish-gray fog that reduces visibility to maybe 10 or 15 feet when it's bad. You can see it rolling through the streets like a living thing, pooling in low areas, creeping into buildings through cracks in the walls. It smells like chemicals and burning metal and decay, a scent that sticks in your throat and makes you gag if you're not used to it. And breathing it unfiltered is signing your own death warrant. Just slowly, over years, as your lungs deteriorate and fill with scar tissue. The gray is heaviest in the lower levels, the sump and the areas around the old mining shafts. Down there it's so thick you need a respirator or serious augmentation just to survive. Children born in the sump often have lung problems from birth, their bodies already damaged by exposure in the womb. The life expectancy down there is brutal. If disease doesn't get you, the gray will. It's like living in a poison cloud that never dissipates, just gets worse. Middle levels get the gray in waves depending on wind patterns and industrial output. Some days are better, some days you wake up and can't see across the street. Most people in the middle levels wear respirators when they go outside, cloth masks at minimum. The ones who can afford it get filtration augments surgically installed. The ones who can't just tough it out and hope they don't develop lung rot before they're 30. Even the upper levels aren't completely safe. The gray doesn't rise that high usually, but on bad days, or when there's a major industrial accident, it can climb pretty high. Upper-level residents like to think they're above it all, literally, but they're still breathing Zaun's air, still taking damage just slower than the people below. The health effects are predictable and horrible. Chronic cough is universal in Zaun. Everyone's got it, that wet, rattling cough that never quite goes away. Lung scarring, respiratory infections, emphysema, cancer, these are just facts of life. You don't ask if someone will get sick from the gray, you ask when and how bad. Medicine helps? If you can afford it, augmentation can filter out the worst of it, but there's no cure for living in a toxic cloud your entire life. The gray has also changed Zaun's evolution in weird ways. There's evidence that Zaunites are developing genetic resistance to certain toxins, that their bodies are adapting to the environment over generations. Some people are born with denser lung tissue or more efficient oxygen processing. It's natural selection on fast forward. The ones who can't handle the gray die young, and the ones who can pass on their genes. It's the most griefing example of adaptation you'll ever see. Piltover, of course, knows about the gray. They know their industries contribute to it. They know Zaunites are dying from it. They just don't care enough to do anything meaningful about it. Occasionally, they'll pass regulations requiring factories to use filtration systems, but enforcement is minimal, and the penalties are cheaper than actually fixing the problem. It's more cost-effective to pay the fines and keep polluting than to invest in clean technology. Some Zaunite inventors have tried to develop solutions, massive air filtration systems, chemical processes to break down the toxins, even weather manipulation devices to disperse the gray. But these projects require resources that Zaun doesn't have, and Piltover isn't going to fund them. Why would they? The gray doesn't affect Piltover, and fixing it would be expensive and cut into profits. So the gray just exists, a constant presence in Zaunite life. A reminder that your environment is actively trying to kill you, and no one cares enough to stop it. People wear respirators like they're normal clothes. Children play in streets where visibility is measured in feet, and everyone just accepts that breathing will probably be what kills them eventually. It's the equivalent of playing a game where you're taking percent health damage every second just for existing, and there's no fountain to heal at. The gray is Zaun in microcosm, a problem created by systematic neglect, maintained by economic incentives, and ignored by the people who have the power to fix it. It's why Zaunites are so tough, so angry, and so done with Piltover's version of progress. Because progress for Piltover means poison for Zaun, and they're tired of pretending that's acceptable. So yeah, next time you complain about air quality in your city, just remember, at least you don't live in Zaun, where the air is literally trying to kill you and has been for decades. Could be worse. You could be breathing the gray. Now here's where Zaun gets really creative in a body horror kind of way. When you can't compete with Piltover's resources, when the environment is actively trying to kill you, and when your organic meat body just isn't cutting it anymore, you upgrade. Zaunite augmentation is like taking the item shop and applying it directly to your flesh. Need to work longer hours in the factory? Get a mechanical arm that doesn't get tired. Can't breathe the gray? Install a filtration system in your chest. Want to compete in the underground fighting rings? Replace your bones with metal and your blood with chem juice. Augmentation in Zaun isn't about enhancement for fun or aesthetics like it might be in other places. It's about survival and competitive advantage in an environment that's constantly trying to kill you. You don't get augments because you think they're cool, though some people do. You get them because your job requires it, or because your body is failing, or because you need every advantage you can get to stay alive. It's as necessary as buying items in League. You can try to win without them, but you're going to lose. The most basic augments are respiratory systems. Given the gray and the toxic air quality, having natural lungs in Zaun is basically a death sentence. Filtration masks help, but surgical implants are better. You've got everything from simple filter implants that sit in your throat to full mechanical lung replacements that can process basically any atmosphere. The wealthy get clean, efficient systems from licensed augmentation specialists. The poor get whatever they can afford from back alley surgeons, which might work great or might kill you in 6 months. It's a gamble. Then you've got labor augments, mechanical limbs, reinforced spines, strength enhancers. Factory work in Zaun is brutal, and human bodies break down under the strain. Get a mechanical arm and you can work twice as long without fatigue. Get a reinforced spine and you can lift loads that would cripple a normal person. Get muscle enhancement injections, and you're worth more to employers. It's not slavery because you're choosing the augments, but when the alternative is starving, how much choice do you really have? Combat augments are where things get really unhinged. In a city where violence is common and the strongest survive, being augmented for combat is a massive advantage. Subdermal armor plating, reflex enhancers, hydraulic strength systems, built-in weapons. People turn themselves into living weapons because sometimes that's what you need to be. The Chem Baron's enforcers are usually heavily augmented, walking tanks that can shrug off bullets and punch through walls. Underground fight clubs are full of augmented brawlers who've modified their bodies to deal maximum damage. Chemical augmentation is another whole category. Instead of mechanical parts, you alter your body chemistry. Chem glands that produce stimulants or painkillers on demand. Adrenal boosters that let you push beyond normal human limits. Blood filtration systems that let you process toxins. Some people combine chemical and mechanical augments, becoming these hybrid beings that are barely recognizable as human anymore. It's like building full AD and AP on the same champion. It shouldn't work, but sometimes it does. The augmentation process itself ranges from professional to absolutely terrifying. Legitimate augmentation clinics exist in Zaun's upper levels, run by trained specialists who know what they're doing. They use sterile equipment, proper anesthesia, and follow-up care. They're expensive, but you're unlikely to die on the table. Then you've got the mid-tier shops, skilled enough to do the work, cheap enough to be affordable, but not exactly following medical best practices. And at the bottom, you've got butchers working in basement labs who'll install whatever you want for whatever you can pay. And if you die, well, that's what you get for being poor. The social implications are complex. In Zaun, being augmented is normal. Almost everyone has something. But there's a hierarchy. Clean professional augments from good clinics signal wealth and success. Obvious crude augments from cheap shops mark you as poor. And having no augments at all, that marks you as either incredibly poor or incredibly tough, depending on context. It's a visible marker of your social class, your profession, and your choices. Piltover looks at Zaunite augmentation with disgust and fascination. They see it as barbaric, as mutilation, as proof that Zaunites are less civilized. But they also steal the innovations, refine them, and sell sanitized versions to the wealthy. A Zaunite chemist develops a new muscle enhancer. Within a year, a Piltover company will have a cleaner, safer version at 10 times the price. It's cultural appropriation at an industrial scale. There's also the philosophical question that no one wants to address. At what point does augmentation stop being human modification and start being something else? If you replace your lungs, your arms, your eyes, half your brain, are you still you? Zaunites generally don't care. Identity isn't about what body parts you have. It's about who you are and where you come from. But it's a question that haunts some people late at night. The most extreme cases are people who are more machine than flesh, who've replaced so much of themselves that they're barely biological anymore. Some do it by choice, pursuing some idea of perfection or superiority. Others do it out of necessity, replacing parts as they fail until there's almost nothing organic left. They're still people, still Zaunite, but they're also living proof of how far desperation and innovation can push the boundaries of human existence. It's not pretty, it's not clean, and it definitely voids your warranty as a human being. But it works. Some people go full cyborg, others just get minor upgrades, and there's an entire black market of augmentation specialists who will install whatever you can afford. It's transhumanism meets desperation, and honestly, it's the most Zaun thing ever. Anyway, that's why every Zaunite champion in League looks like they walked out of a cyberpunk nightmare. Because in Zaun, modifying your body isn't weird. It's Tuesday. Okay, so between Piltover and Zaun, there's this weird in-between zone called the Entresol, and it's basically the most awkward elo in the ranking system. It's where the two cities technically meet, where some brave or desperate souls from both sides try to coexist. You've got Pilties who aren't quite rich enough to stay topside, Zaunites who've managed to claw their way up a few levels, and everyone's just trying to survive in this weird liminal space. The Entresol exists in the middle levels of the city, in that space between Piltover's lower districts and Zaun's upper districts. Physically, it's characterized by buildings that show influence from both cities. Piltovan architecture that's falling into disrepair, Zaunite structures that are built more stably than usual. The air is clearer than Zaun, but not as clean as Piltover. You can see the sky, but it's hazy. You can breathe without a respirator, but you'll probably develop a cough eventually. It's better than Zaun, worse than Piltover, and distinctly its own thing. The people who live in the Entresol are an interesting mix. You've got Piltovans who couldn't make it in the upper city, failed inventors, disgraced merchants, families that fell on hard times. They came down because rent is cheaper, because they had no other options, because they made mistakes that cost them their social standing. They're bitter about their fall, nostalgic for Piltover, and desperately trying to maintain the pretense that they're still proper citizens. They're like players who dropped from platinum to gold and won't stop talking about their peak rating. Then you've got Zaunites who've done well enough to afford better housing, safer neighborhoods, cleaner air. Successful merchants, skilled augmentation specialists, mid-tier Chembaron enforcers. They've climbed out of the worst of Zaun, but can't quite reach Piltover proper. They're proud of how far they've come, but frustrated by how far they still have to go. They're the grinders who finally made it to gold, but can see platinum and diamond above them, and know it's going to be a hard climb. And then there's the people who were born in the Entresol, who've never known either extreme. They're not quite Piltovan, not quite Zaunite, just Entresol residents. They have their own culture, their own identity, separate from both cities. They're the ones who find the whole Piltover versus Zaun thing exhausting and just want to live their lives without getting caught in the crossfire. The Entresol has its own economy, largely based on being the interface between the two cities. Legal trade happens here. Piltovan merchants buying Zaunite goods, Zaunite workers selling their services to Piltovan employers. There are markets where both populations shop, taverns where both populations drink, though rarely at the same time, and businesses that cater to both. It's the legitimate face of the relationship between the cities, the part where they can pretend to be civilized. But there's also a massive illegal economy. The Entresol is where smuggling happens, where contraband moves between the cities. Hextech devices stolen from Piltover get fenced here. Chemtech weapons from Zaun get sold to Piltovan criminals here. Information gets traded, bribes get paid, deals get made. The enforcers know this happens but can't stop it. There's too much territory to patrol, too many hiding spots, too many people willing to look the other way for the right price. Politically, the Entresol is a nightmare. Piltover claims jurisdiction, but their authority is weak here. The enforcers patrol occasionally, but not constantly. The Chembarons have influence but don't directly control most areas. It's a power vacuum where street gangs, merchant guilds, and community organizations compete for influence. There's no unified government, just a patchwork of local power structures that maintain rough order. Violence in the Entresol is less extreme than in Zaun, but more common than in Piltover. Muggings happen. Gang fights break out. Occasionally, a Chembaron's enforcers will conduct an operation here, Or Piltover enforcers will raid a smuggling operation, and normal residents just try to stay out of the way. It's not safe, but it's predictable. You learn which streets to avoid, which times are dangerous, which gangs to pay protection money to. It's just the cost of living here. Socially, the entresol is where the two cultures collide and create something weird. You've got Piltover fashion mixed with Zaunite pragmatism. You've got proper speech mixed with undercity slang. You've got people wearing respirators with expensive suits, carrying hextech devices and chemtech weapons, eating street food while discussing patent law. It's a hybrid culture that both cities look down on. Piltover sees it as too low. Zaun sees it as pretentious. The entresol is also where relationships between Pilties and Zaunites actually happen. In Piltover or Zaun proper, such relationships are scandalous, but in the entresol, they're uncommon but not shocking. Mixed couples, mixed families, people who've crossed the class divide and made it work. They face prejudice from both sides, but in the entresol, there's at least some acceptance. It's like being in Gold 1. You're close to Platinum, Piltover, but you can still see Silver, Zaun, in your rearview mirror, and you're not really sure which direction you're going. The future of the entresol is uncertain. As tensions between Piltover and Zaun escalate, as the political situation deteriorates, the entresol becomes more important as neutral ground but also more dangerous as a contested zone. Both sides want to control it, neither can fully claim it. It's a buffer zone that could either prevent open conflict or become the battlefield where it starts. For now, it's just this weird in-between space where normal people try to live normal lives despite being caught between two cities that hate each other. It's not quite as oppressive as Zaun, not quite as pretentious as Piltover, just this weird middle ground where everyone's equally suspicious of each other and equally tired of the whole situation. Let me tell you about the most depressing landmark in Runeterra. There's this massive bridge connecting Piltover to Zaun, and it's basically the only official way to travel between the two cities. For Pilties, it's just a route they take when they need to do business in the Undercity, and by business, I mean exploiting cheap labor or buying illegal goods. For Zaunites, it's a checkpoint where enforcers make sure you're not bringing anything dangerous topside, which really means making sure poor people stay poor and down below. The bridge is an engineering marvel, one of the few structures that survived the collapse mostly intact. It's a massive stone and steel construction that spans the chasm between the upper and lower cities, wide enough for multiple lanes of traffic. On the Piltover side, it starts at one of the lower districts and descends gradually down. On the Zaun side, it connects to the upper levels of the Undercity. It's probably a 15-20 minute walk from one side to the other if you're moving at a normal pace and don't get stopped. Architecturally, you can see the divide clearly. The Piltover end is well maintained, clean, with decorative elements and proper lighting. The middle section is functional but plain. The Zaun end is covered in graffiti, poorly lit, with makeshift additions and repairs bolted on wherever they were needed. It's like watching a Champions model quality decrease as you move from base skin to launch skin to release skin from 10 seasons ago. The bridge sees constant traffic because despite all the tension between the cities, commerce never stops. Shipments of goods move both ways, raw materials and manufactured products going up to Piltover, processed goods and hextech components going down to Zaun. Workers commute across it daily. Zaunites traveling to factory jobs on Piltover's industrial periphery. Merchants use it to access both markets. It's a vital artery for both cities' economies, which means it can never fully close no matter how bad relations get. But it's also a choke point and a control mechanism. The Piltovan side has a formal checkpoint with enforcers checking documentation and searching for contraband. If you're a Zaunite trying to enter Piltover, you better have proper papers, work permits, business licenses, sponsorship from a Piltovan citizen, something that proves you have a legitimate reason to be topside. And even with proper papers, you're subject to search. The enforcers go through your belongings, your clothes. They check you for augmentations that might be considered weapons. It's slow, humiliating, and designed to discourage casual travel. Pilties moving down to Zaun face much less scrutiny because Piltover doesn't care about protecting Zaun. There's a token checkpoint on the Zaun side, but it's minimally staffed and rarely enforces anything. The attitude is, if you're dumb enough to go to Zaun, that's your problem. Though they will stop you if you're obviously carrying valuable hex tech, devices, or large amounts of money, supposedly to protect you from theft, but really to track valuable assets. The bridge has also become a symbolic dividing line. When people talk about going topside or going under, they mean crossing the bridge. It represents the barrier between the two worlds, the literal and metaphorical distance between Piltover and Zaun. Crossing the bridge means entering a different reality with different rules, different dangers, different opportunities. It's like crossing from one server region to another, except the ping difference is actually just systematic oppression. Violence on the bridge is rare because both sides need it functional, but it happens. Occasionally, there are protests on the Zaun side, crowds demanding better treatment or access to Piltover, and enforcers break them up with overwhelming force. Sometimes there are robberies or gang fights in the less patrolled areas. Rarely, there are terrorist attacks or assassination attempts by radical elements from either side. When violence happens on the bridge, both cities respond quickly because shutting it down, even temporarily, costs everyone money. The bridge is also where a lot of the smuggling happens, despite all the security. With so much legitimate traffic, it's impossible to check everything thoroughly. People hide contraband in shipments, bribe enforcers to look the other way, use secret compartments in vehicles. Stolen hex tech flows down to Zaun. Illegal chemtech weapons flow up to Piltover. Information and money move both ways. The bridge checkpoint catches some of it, but most slips through because the volume is just too high. For people who live in the Entresol, the bridge is a daily reality. They cross it regularly for work or shopping or visiting family on either side. They know which enforcers are strict and which are lazy, which times of day have shorter lines, how to carry themselves to avoid extra scrutiny. It becomes routine, just another annoying part of life in the Twin Cities. But for people who rarely cross, wealthy Pilties venturing down or sump residents making a rare trip up, the bridge is intimidating, a threshold they're nervous about crossing. The bridge has also witnessed history. Major events in Piltover-Zaun relations often involve the bridge. Peace negotiations, diplomatic meetings, prisoner exchanges. These formal interactions happen on the bridge as neutral ground, but so do riots, crackdowns, and standoffs. The bridge has been stained with blood more than once, even though both sides try to keep it functional. There are persistent rumors of secret passages and alternative routes between the cities, abandoned mine shafts, sewer systems, smuggler tunnels. These definitely exist, but they're dangerous, partially collapsed, and controlled by criminals. The bridge remains the main route because despite all its problems, it's relatively safe and direct. The alternatives might avoid the checkpoint, but they might also collapse on you or lead you into gang territory where you get robbed or killed. It's basically the most depressing landmark in Runeterra. It's like if the only way to get from bronze to silver was through a gate controlled by diamond players who really don't want you climbing. The bridge connects two cities that need each other but hate each other, enabling the toxic relationship that defines them both. It's a monument to dysfunction, a permanent reminder that Piltover and Zaun are separate, unequal, and likely to stay that way. So yeah, that's the bridge. It's technically neutral ground, but in practice it's just another tool of oppression. At least it's got a nice view of the chasm though, if you can see through the gray. Now here's where Piltover really rubs it in. Once a year, they hold Progress Day, which is this massive festival celebrating all their technological achievements and innovations. There are demonstrations, exhibitions, speeches from the founding families, and everyone parades around showing off their latest hex tech inventions. It's supposed to celebrate human ingenuity and the spirit of progress, but really, it's just Piltover flexing on Zaun. They're literally celebrating progress while people below are dying from the pollution created by that same progress. Progress Day is Piltover's biggest holiday, more important than any religious festival or historical commemoration. It celebrates the founding of modern Piltover, the establishment of the Academy, and the city's commitment to innovation and advancement. The official narrative is that Progress Day honors all of humanity's achievements and inspires the next generation of inventors. The reality is, it's a propaganda event designed to reinforce Piltover's superiority and attract investment from foreign nations. The celebration lasts the entire day and into the night. The main events happen in the Academy District and the Central Plaza, but festivities spread throughout Piltover's upper levels. Streets get decorated with banners and lights. Vendors set up stalls selling food and trinkets. Musicians perform. Crowds gather to watch demonstrations of new technology. It's like Piltover went all in on a victory flex after winning a tournament. The highlight is always the exhibition of new inventions. Prominent inventors and wealthy sponsors present their latest projects to the crowd and to potential investors. Hex-tech devices that can do incredible things, mechanical marvels that push the boundaries of engineering, medical breakthroughs that could save lives, assuming you can afford them. Each presentation is a spectacle, with dramatic reveals, impressive demonstrations, and speeches about how this innovation will change the world. The crowd applauds, investors take notes, and the inventor's reputation and fortune are made. For Academy students and young inventors, Progress Day is the biggest opportunity of the year. Presenting at Progress Day can launch a career, attract sponsors, earn you a place in one of the prestigious workshops. Everyone's competing for attention, trying to create something impressive enough to get noticed. The competition is fierce and sometimes dirty. Sabotage isn't unheard of, though proving it is difficult. It's ranked anxiety, except the stakes are your entire future career. The founding families use Progress Day to show off their wealth and influence. They sponsor the biggest demonstrations, host elaborate parties, make strategic announcements about new ventures. Being seen at the right events, making connections with the right people, investing in the right projects. Progress Day is where Piltover's power players maneuver for advantage. The council members give speeches about Piltover's greatness and their vision for the future, which mostly means maintaining the status quo while sounding progressive. Common Piltovan citizens enjoy Progress Day as a festival. They get a day off work, they attend the exhibitions, they eat good food, they feel proud of their city. For them, it's a celebration of being Piltovan, of living in the most advanced city in Runeterra. They genuinely believe in the narrative of progress and innovation, and Progress Day reinforces that belief. They don't think about Zaun, don't consider the costs of their prosperity. It's just a nice day out. Some Zaunites actually travel up for Progress Day, hoping to see the wonders of Hex-tech or maybe present their own inventions. They're allowed to attend. Piltover isn't going to turn down foreign visitors who might spend money, but they're clearly marked as outsiders. They dress differently, they smell like Zaun's chemicals, they don't have the refined manners of Pilties. They're tolerated as tourists in a museum. Look but don't touch, and definitely don't think you belong here. For the very few Zaunite inventors who manage to present at Progress Day, it's the opportunity of a lifetime, and also incredibly fraught. They're competing against Piltovan inventors who have better resources, better training, better connections. The judges are biased toward Piltovan innovations. The crowd is skeptical of anything from Zaun. But if a Zaunite can present something genuinely impressive, something that forces Piltover to acknowledge their talent, it can change everything. It's the one time when merit might actually matter more than birthplace. Might. Usually doesn't, but might. The unspoken subtext of Progress Day is what makes it so grieving. Piltover is celebrating innovations that were often built with Zaunite labor, powered by resources extracted from Zaun, and made profitable by exploiting Zaunite workers. They're celebrating progress that creates the pollution-killing Zaunites. They're showcasing Hex-tech that Zaun isn't allowed to use, and they do it all while pretending Zaun doesn't exist, or worse, using Zaun as a cautionary tale. Look what happens when you don't embrace progress and civilization like we have. Some radical Zaunites see Progress Day as the perfect target for protest or terrorism. A large gathering of Piltover's elite, maximum visibility, maximum symbolic impact. Enforcer presence is heavy during Progress Day for this reason. Security is tight, and any Zaunite who looks suspicious gets extra scrutiny. There have been incidents over the years, fights, theft, a few attempted bombings that got stopped. Nothing that seriously disrupted the event, but enough to make everyone nervous. The evening culminates in a fireworks display that's visible from both cities. Expensive pyrotechnics paint the sky with light and color, a display of wealth and technological achievement. In Piltover, people watch and celebrate. In Zaun, people watch and feel Complicated things. Anger at the waste, envy of the beauty, resentment at the reminder of what they don't have. Some ignore it entirely. Others watch specifically because it pisses them off and they want to remember why they hate Piltover. Progress Day perfectly encapsulates Piltover's worldview. We're the best, we're the future, we're what civilization looks like, and if you're not part of it, that's because you're not good enough, not working hard enough, not civilized enough. It's the ultimate gaslighting event, wrapping systemic oppression in the language of meritocracy and progress. It's the equivalent of your enemy laner spamming their mastery emote after killing you with their 300 gold shutdown. Technically, they earned it, but also they had help and advantages you didn't get, and them flexing about it just makes you want to int their whole team out of spite. Anyway, that's Progress Day. Once a year, Piltover reminds everyone, especially Zaun, exactly who's on top, and they wonder why Zaun keeps plotting revolution. Okay, so this next part, absolutely unhinged. Despite all the inequality, all the violence, and all the mutual disgust, Piltover and Zaun actually need each other. Piltover needs Zaun's cheap labor, its manufacturing, and its willingness to do the dangerous work that Pilties won't touch. Zaun needs Piltover's resources, its access to global trade, and honestly, something to unite against. It's the most toxic codependent relationship in Runeterra. They're like two players in a duo queue who absolutely hate each other but keep queuing together because they win more games that way. Let's start with what Piltover gets from Zaun. Labor is the obvious one. Zaunites work in Piltover's factories, mines, and industrial facilities for wages that Piltovan workers would never accept. They do the dirty, dangerous, grueling work that keeps Piltover's economy running. They manufacture components for Hextech devices. They process raw materials. They build the infrastructure. Without Zaunite labor, Piltover's costs would skyrocket and their competitive advantage would disappear. It's exploitation, but it's also economically essential to maintaining Piltover's prosperity. Zaun also serves as Piltover's testing ground for dangerous innovations. Chemtech gets developed in Zaun first, and if it works, Piltover refines it and sells sanitized versions. Medical procedures get tested on Zaunites before being offered to Piltovan patients. New augmentation techniques get pioneered in Zaun's clinics. Piltover gets to benefit from these innovations without taking the risks of developing them. It's like having an entire city serve as your beta testing environment, except the bugs can kill people and no one cares. Piltover also uses Zaun as a dumping ground for everything they don't want. Industrial waste, criminal elements, failed inventors, anyone who doesn't fit in the Golden City gets pushed down to Zaun. It's convenient. You don't have to deal with your problems, you just make them Zaun's problems. And if conditions in Zaun get bad enough that people get desperate, well, desperate people work cheaper and complain less. It's systematic oppression optimized for economic efficiency. Politically, Zaun serves as Piltover's boogeyman. When Piltovan politicians want to scare people into supporting authoritarian policies, they invoke the threat of Zaunite criminals and chemtech weapons. When they want to justify increased enforcer funding, they point to unrest in the Undercity. When they need a scapegoat for any problem, they blame Zaun. It's propaganda that maintains social cohesion in Piltover by giving everyone a common enemy to fear and look down on. Now let's look at what Zaun gets from Piltover. Resources are the big one. Piltover controls access to global trade, which means access to materials that don't exist in Zaun. Medical supplies, raw materials for manufacturing, food, technology. Zaun can produce a lot on its own, but it can't be completely self-sufficient. They need goods from the outside world, and those goods flow through Piltover's markets. Getting cut off from Piltover would mean economic collapse for Zaun. Piltover also provides a market for Zaunite goods and services, manufactured products, augmentation tech, chemical compounds. Piltover and the wider world buy these things, providing income that keeps Zaun's economy functioning. Yes, Piltover undervalues Zaunite labor and products, but some income is better than none. Without access to Piltover's markets, Zaun would be even poorer than it already is. Infrastructure is another factor. The bridge, the trade routes, the connections to the rest of Valorant, these are controlled by Piltover, and Zaun benefits from access to them. Trying to build alternative infrastructure would be incredibly expensive, and probably get sabotaged by Piltover anyway. So Zaun uses Piltover's infrastructure, pays the tariffs and fees, and accepts being dependent on it. But maybe most importantly, Piltover gives Zaun identity and purpose. The shared experience of oppression, of being looked down on, of fighting against a common enemy. This unites Zaun in a way that nothing else could. Without Piltover to hate, Zaun would probably tear itself apart in internal conflicts between Chem Barons and factions. Piltover provides an external enemy that keeps Zaunites focused outward instead of on their own internal divisions. The relationship is fundamentally toxic but also stable in a weird way. Both cities benefit from maintaining the status quo, even if they'd never admit it. Piltover gets cheap labor and an economic advantage. Zaun gets access to resources and markets. Neither side wants open war because war would disrupt trade and cost both cities economically, so they maintain this horrible equilibrium where Piltover exploits Zaun. Zaun resents Piltover, and nothing fundamentally changes because changing it would be expensive and risky for both sides. This is why reform is so difficult. Any attempt to improve conditions in Zaun threatens Piltover's economic model. Any attempt by Zaun to gain independence threatens their access to resources. Both sides are locked into this relationship by economic realities and historical grievances. Breaking the cycle would require one side to accept short-term losses for long-term gains, and no one's willing to do that. The Chem Barons understand this dynamic and use it. They maintain enough order in Zaun that Piltover doesn't feel the need to intervene militarily, but enough disorder that Zaunites stay angry and desperate enough to work cheap. They profit from the status quo while positioning themselves as champions of Zaun against Piltover's oppression. It's cynical and effective. Some reformers on both sides try to fix things. Piltovan progressives who want to improve conditions in Zaun, Zaunite moderates who want better relations with Piltover. But they're fighting against economic incentives and cultural inertia, the wealthy. The families in Piltover profit too much from exploitation to give it up. The Chem Barons in Zaun profit too much from disorder to allow real reform. And the average citizens on both sides have been taught to hate and fear each other for so long that changing those attitudes seems impossible. Piltover can't admit that their golden city is built on exploitation, and Zaun can't admit that without Piltover's infrastructure they'd collapse even further. So they maintain this status quo where Piltover pretends Zaun doesn't exist except when they need something, and Zaun seethes with resentment while plotting revolution. It's not sustainable, it's not healthy, and everyone knows it's going to explode eventually. It's just a matter of when, and what happens in ARCANE is basically that explosion happening. But that's a story for another video. For now, just understand that Piltover and Zaun are locked in a death spiral of mutual dependence and hatred, each making the other worse, neither able to break free. It's the most toxic relationship in Runeterra, and it's been going on for decades with no end in sight. So yeah, next time you think your ranked duo is toxic, just remember, at least you're not Piltover and Zaun, where the toxicity is literally systematic and spans generations. At least you can dodge. They can't. So tonight, as you close your eyes in your warm bed with your phone charging and your mental slightly less broken than it was in your last ranked game, just remember, at least you're not living in Piltover or Zaun. At least you didn't get born into a society where your entire life is determined by whether you spawned above or below an arbitrary line. At least you're not breathing toxic air that's slowly killing you, or pretending that's normal while sipping tea in a golden tower built on mass graves. We just talked about two cities that hate each other so much they've built their entire identities around it. Piltover, the city of progress, where innovation means exploitation and advancement means leaving everyone else behind. Zaun, the undercity that refuses to die, where survival requires modifying your body and huffing chemicals just to make it to 30. A relationship so toxic that calling it codependent feels generous, more like mutually assured dysfunction that's been going on for generations. And the worst part? Both cities know exactly what they're doing. Piltover knows they're built on exploitation. Zaun knows they're dependent on the system that oppresses them. Everyone knows it's unsustainable. Everyone knows it's going to explode eventually, but changing it would require sacrifice, compromise, and admitting you've been wrong for decades. So instead, they just keep grinding, keep exploiting, keep hating, waiting for someone else to blink first. Before Arcane made it all visual and traumatic, this was the reality. Two cities, one chasm, infinite resentment. The rich getting richer while literally poisoning the poor. The poor getting angrier while being told it's their own fault for not working hard enough. Progress that benefits the few while destroying the many. It's systematic oppression with really good PR, and it's been the status quo for longer than most people have been alive. But here's the thing about unstable equilibriums. They don't last forever. Pressure builds. Resentment accumulates. Someone invents something that changes the game, or someone gets desperate enough to light the match, and suddenly everything that seemed permanent starts falling apart. That's what Arcane is about, really. The moment when the tension finally snaps, and both cities have to face what they've been ignoring. But that's not tonight's story. Tonight was about understanding how we got there. How one ambitious canal project became two cities locked in eternal conflict. How progress and poverty became neighbors separated by a bridge and a chasm, and about 1,000,000 tons of systematic inequality. How people adapted, survived, innovated, and suffered in a world that was designed to keep them in their place. So as you drift off to sleep, listening to the sound of your fan or your white noise or whatever helps you rest, just take a moment to appreciate that you live in a world where the air doesn't actively try to kill you, where your life expectancy isn't determined by how deep underground you were born, where you can climb, however slowly, without needing to surgically modify your body or sell your soul to a crime lord. Yeah, ranked can be toxic. Yeah, life has its struggles. But at least you're not living in Runeterra's most dysfunctional relationship. Because League lore may be dark and tragic and honestly kind of messed up, but hey, at least we just have to deal with it in-game. We can Alt F4. We can log off. We can take a break and come back tomorrow. The people of Piltover and Zaun, they're stuck there, grinding it out day after day, breathing poison and pretending everything's fine while the whole system slowly collapses around them. And honestly, that makes our ranked struggles seem pretty manageable in comparison. So take that small comfort, let your breathing slow down, let your mind drift, and know that tomorrow you'll wake up in a world that, however flawed, is at least not actively trying to kill you with industrial runoff. Anyway, sleep well, gamers. Tomorrow's another day to int your promos and flame your jungler. But for now, rest easy knowing that no matter how bad your ranked games get, no matter how toxic your teammates are, no matter how many times you get demoted, at least you're not living in the twin cities of systematic oppression and chemical warfare. GG. Sleep tight. Don't let the chemtech bite. And hey, if you actually made it this far and you're still awake, go ahead and drop a comment telling me which city you'd rather live in and why you're wrong either way. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.